Before we continue our studio conversation, just a brief recap of the MPC's decision today. The members decided to tighten further by raising the monetary policy rate by 50 basis points to 27.25% from 26.75%. Previously, retain the asymmetric corridor around the MPR at plus 500 minus 100. Raise the deposit money bank's cash reserve ratio by 500 basis points to 50% from 45%. Merchant banks by 200 basis points to 16%, and members retained the liquidity ratio at 30%. Well, of course, let's unpack the outcome of this meeting. Bismarck Rewane, CEO of Financial Derivatives, Tony Sonny, Executive Vice Chairman at the Emerging Africa Group, and Gregory Cranston, Consultant on African Economics, are still with us for today's conversation. Thank you so much for your patience so far. Well, you heard the Central Bank Governor. He said we're not out of the woods yet and we cannot take any chances. And I'll also add that I guess we can all agree that we didn't see this tightening coming. Bismarck, let's hear your thoughts.
I was more aggressive. I said maintain status quo because the consensus was actually that there could be a reduction to loosen. But the comment that he made after the decision was a lot more is required to achieve its primary mandate of price stability. So, and two, he said, we are tracking core inflation. So he actually disaggregated core and structural issues from transient inflationary issues. So he was not going to be carried away by the transient 2 months of reduction when the core inflation is still increasing. Core inflation increasing annualized, core inflation increasing monthly. And without saying it, he had actually prepared himself for one, a further increase in the price of petrol, which is inevitable. So let's say we go from 900 to 1,200. That's another, say, 30%, right? And also the minimum wage consequential cost, which means that you're paying from July. So is the imported goods going to be able to bring prices down and keep it down? He's not so sure. So he's erring on the side of caution. Next meeting, November 26th, too late in the year to do anything more. So I might as well do it now. So I guess this was bold, this was audacious, and quite frankly, it would probably help to stabilize the naira a little bit, right? But definitely the cost of borrowing is going to be higher. The rate of default on loans is going to be higher, but liquidity management in terms of using the dollars to buy naira, to take naira out of the system, and the allusion to the fact that every time there was FAC, that the exchange rate fell, which means that, with all due respect, right, he's alluding to the fact that FAC leaks, right, and affects, so FAC is governors and state governments, and then the spending of the money through all sorts of channels, right, is leading to exchange rate weakness. In other words, tighten money supply, reduce high-powered money, block the leakages, and increase interest rates.
So let's hear your reaction, and do you agree with the rationale of the central bank governor?
I think the rationale is clear, and I think the CBN governor has made it clear that his priorities have not changed, and the first priority is essentially to curb the monster, which is inflation. And you heard him say that we cannot say that we want to reduce poverty in a highly inflationary environment, and that so if we are sincere in our intention to fight poverty or reduce poverty, then we have to deal with inflation. The second priority clearly was also to continue to maintain an environment in which we will not have spikes in foreign exchange from the leakages that Bismarck has mentioned. He obviously also continues to prioritize maintaining the confidence of and the attractiveness of naira assets and the confidence in the management of our economy. So in a way, he wants to show consistency. I think one other point that he made that resonated with me is that in real terms, this MPR is still in the negative if you weigh it against the current inflation rate. So we're not there yet. That's what he's saying, and I'm going to double down on my tightening measures. So
You're absolutely right. We're not there yet. Gregory, I mean, an unexpected 50 basis points hike from Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee. Your response to this, and we know that, I mean, there's been talk about that African central bank governors would change course at the end of from September till the end of the year on the back of what we're seeing globally. But we're doing things differently here. What are your thoughts?
Thanks for that. Well, I mean, I did say that before the governor spoke that I thought no change, but I wanted a small increase. So we've got a small increase. And as my friends on the panel have pointed out, the governor's restated his credentials, which are, get on top of excess liquidity, conserve, and maintain a tight stance. So we've got an increase. We may well get another one to come. The point about core inflation, just to say that core inflation, I think, if I heard correctly, the plan is to revisit the basket, the CPI basket. But core inflation, yes, I mean, strictly, that's what the textbook tells you that you should be monitoring, because these are the items of the basket of which monetary policy has some influence, unlike food prices and flooding, which hasn't been mentioned, and energy spikes. So I think all in all, yep, I think it's the right thing to have done. I take the point, of course, about borrowing costs. It's unfortunate that, well, if you look at private credit extension to the private sector has been increasing in relation to GDP. So we're now up to about 30% by my calculation. We're going in the right direction. But obviously, we were 20% not that long ago. But unfortunately, of course, this is another disincentive. But I think, that just have to bite the bullet and get on with it. And that's what the MPC's delivered. It'll be very interesting to see subsequently how the committee voted. But obviously, there's a majority for the measures taken. All
right, well, we'll definitely get those details in the coming days. Thank you so much, Gregory Bismarck. Back to you. I mean, for the small businesses who are listening to this and wondering to themselves, I mean, how does this government want to grow this economy if we're having the cost of borrowing as high as this? How do we? I know that obviously to slow down the economy, slow down spending, and all of that. But we have real businesses. We have these businesses that are the engine of growth for the economy. So where does that leave the economy? Where does that leave these businesses?
Small businesses normally start their business with friends and family and friends. Now, so what they're telling you, go back to your family and friends and raise as much money. But the family and friends have to actually forsake a higher return on investment from their savings accounts now, which are going to increase. So things become pretty tight, and you have to be much more efficient in the management of your funds. The other thing is that the monetary conditions were loose, right? When monetary conditions are loose, monetary policy has to be tight. Right, so it's done that. You can't make omelette without breaking eggs. In other words, there will be casualties to this situation. You can't satisfy everybody. But the most important thing is that pass-through effect of the exchange rate into the market, into the domestic prices, you will slow down that effect somewhat. But basically, at the end, there's a limit to how much monetary policy can actually drive an economy. The growth of this economy is dependent on confidence, both domestic confidence and international confidence. The governor alluded to the fact that his job is to restore trust in the central bank, and I think he's done, to a large extent, he's doing the right things. Now, how do you build upon that? So monetary policy is only one segment. There's investment policy, trade policy, fiscal policy. So the government, the federal government as a whole, and the state governments for that matter, need to start working on building that, bridging that trust deficit. I think I'm happy that the central bank governor said, but now it is just not what they say, it's what they do. And so we can't be printing money, we can't be doing ways and means. We need to get back to the question of how do we ensure there's growth, how do we block leakages, which he alluded to, and how do we ensure that there's value for money. I think that's the key. And this is not a rocket science. I think we all know it. And I'm happy the central bank sounded as independent and as autonomous as it may be. So, and I think that's great news.
Okay, well, we're winding down now. Tony, closing remarks from you, especially on the fiscal side, how they're going to interpret, this stance from the MPC.
Yeah. So honestly, I'm going to say to everyone that is looking for funding, to look, and not just the small businesses, small, medium-sized, big businesses. Let's look at the equity side of things and say to ourselves that, yeah, cost of debt is rising, but that makes equity more attractive. You also need to realize that most small and medium-sized businesses actually need patient, long-term capital anyway, and that kind of capital will ideally come from equity investors. So in advising my clients, I'm going to be saying to them, let's look at opportunities, on the equity side, both in terms of raising and also for those who are looking for investment outlets as well.
But are you still bullish on the economy?
I am bullish on the economy because what we're talking about now is stability, and consistency. So that speaks to something. So we're not having knee-jerk responses. Yeah. We're having a consistent implementation of policy. So I like that.
All right. Yeah. Amos, thank you for your time. Thank you so much for talking to us today. Well, that's all we have. We can take on today's MPC coverage. A big thank you to my guests, Bismarck Rewane, CEO of Financial Derivatives, Tony Sonny, Executive Vice Chairman at the Emerging Africa Group, and Gregory Cronston, a consultant in African economics.